The morning started like any other morning in the palace. Catherine woke up early, looked at herself in the mirror, and took a deep breath. She had made her decision. Today was the day she would walk away from everything. Her hands were shaking as she picked up her phone and typed a simple message to the family group chat. "I need some time away. Please respect my decision." She pressed send before she could change her mind. The palace had been her home for years, but lately it felt more like a cage. Every day was the same routine. Wake up, smile for the cameras, attend events, say the right things, and pretend everything was perfect. But Catherine was tired. She was tired of pretending, tired of following rules that made no sense, and tired of watching everyone around her play games. Camilla was in her private sitting room when she saw the message. She read it 3 times, not believing what she was seeing. Catherine was leaving. Just like that? Without asking permission? Without discussing it with anyone? Camilla's face turned red with anger. She grabbed her phone and tried to call Catherine, but the call went straight to voicemail. She tried again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. How dare she? Camilla said out loud to the empty room. She stood up and started pacing back and forth. Her mind was racing with thoughts. If Catherine left, what would people say? What would the media write? Would they blame her? Would they say she drove Catherine away? The more she thought about it, the angrier she became. Catherine was already in her car driving away from the palace. She had packed only a small bag with some clothes and personal items. She did not need much. She just needed space to breathe, to think, to be herself again. As she drove through the palace gates, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The guards looked confused but opened the gates. No one stopped her. For the first time in years, she felt free. Meanwhile, back at the palace, news of Catherine's departure was spreading fast. Staff members whispered in hallways. Some were worried about Catherine. Others were worried about what would happen next. The palace had always been a place of order and routine. This was chaos. Camilla called an emergency meeting with her closest advisors. They gathered in the private meeting room, everyone looking nervous and uncertain. Camilla sat at the head of the table, her jaw tight, her eyes cold. "She cannot just leave like this," Camilla said, her voice sharp. "We need to bring her back. This makes us all look bad. This makes me look bad." One of the advisors, an older woman who had worked in the palace for decades, spoke carefully. "Perhaps we should give her the space she asked for. People will understand. Everyone needs a break sometimes." Camilla's eyes flashed with anger. "A break? This is not a vacation. This is abandonment. This is disrespect. She has responsibilities. She has duties. She cannot just run away when things get difficult." But the truth was, things had been difficult for Catherine for a long time. The pressure, the constant criticism, the impossible standards, the feeling that nothing she did was ever good enough. She had tried to talk about it, tried to explain how she felt, but no one really listened. They just told her to smile more, to try harder, to remember her duty. Catherine drove for hours until she reached a small cottage by the sea that belonged to an old friend. The friend had offered it to her months ago, saying, "If you ever need to get away, the door is always open." Catherine had not thought she would actually take the offer. But here she was. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. The cottage was small and simple, nothing like the grand rooms of the palace. There was a small kitchen, a cozy living room with a fireplace, and a bedroom with a view of the ocean. It was perfect. Catherine made herself a cup of tea and sat by the window watching the waves crash against the shore. She felt tears running down her face, but they were not sad tears. They were tears of relief. She had done it. She had actually walked away. Back at the palace, Camilla was making phone calls. She called family members, trying to get them on her side. She called media contacts, trying to control the narrative before the story broke. She was working hard to make sure people saw things her way. Catherine was being selfish. Catherine was being irresponsible. Catherine was the problem. But not everyone agreed with Camilla. Some family members understood why Catherine left. They had seen how hard things had been for her. They had seen the stress, the exhaustion, the sadness in her eyes. They wished Catherine well and hoped she would find peace. The next morning, the news broke. "Catherine takes unexpected break," read one headline. "Royal family in turmoil as Catherine steps back," read another. The media went crazy with speculation. Was there a fight? Was the marriage in trouble? Was someone sick? Everyone had theories, but no one really knew the truth. Catherine turned off her phone and ignored the news. She spent her days walking on the beach, reading books, and sleeping properly for the first time in months. She cooked simple meals, wore comfortable clothes, and did not worry about what anyone thought. It was exactly what she needed. Camilla, however, could not let it go. Every day her anger grew stronger. She saw Catherine's departure as a personal attack, a challenge to her authority. She began to plot ways to bring Catherine back, to make her see reason, to make her understand that she could not just walk away from her responsibilities. But Catherine was not coming back. Not yet, maybe not ever in the same way. She had tasted freedom and she was not ready to give it up. For the first time in years, she was putting herself first, and that felt right. The palace felt different without Catherine. Staff members noticed it. Family members noticed it. Even Camilla noticed it, though she would never admit it. Catherine had brought warmth and genuine kindness to the palace. Without her, it felt colder, emptier. As the days passed, two very different stories were being lived. Catherine was finding herself again, rediscovering who she was beyond the titles and the duties. Camilla was consumed with anger and jealousy, unable to accept that someone had chosen to walk away from the life she valued so highly. This was just the beginning of a story that would change everything for everyone involved. A simple goodbye had set in motion events that no one could have predicted, and in that small cottage by the sea, Catherine was finally breathing again. 3 weeks had passed since Catherine left the palace. She had not returned any calls from Camilla or responded to the dozens of messages. Her phone stayed off most of the time, tucked away in a drawer. Catherine spent her mornings walking along the beach, collecting shells and watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and orange. She had started to sleep through the night without nightmares. Her appetite had returned. The constant headaches that had plagued her for months were gone. She felt like herself again, or at least like she was finding herself after years of being lost. At the palace, Camilla's jealousy had grown into something darker. She could not understand how Catherine could be so calm, so content with walking away from everything. The media was starting to paint Catherine as the sympathetic figure, the one who needed rest and deserved peace. Meanwhile, some articles suggested that palace life had become too demanding, too controlling. "They are making me look like the villain," Camilla complained to her assistant one afternoon. She was reading through a stack of newspapers and magazines, each one seeming to support Catherine's decision. Why does everyone take her side? I am not the bad person here. She is the one who abandoned her duties. Her assistant, a young woman named Sarah, chose her words carefully. The public tends to sympathize with people who appear vulnerable or overwhelmed. Perhaps if we released a statement showing support for Catherine's well-being, it might change the narrative. Camilla threw the newspapers down on her desk. Support her? Why should I support someone who disrespected me and this entire family? No, we need a different approach. That evening, Camilla arranged for several palace sources to leak stories to friendly journalists. The stories painted a different picture of Catherine. They suggested she was being dramatic, that she was not handling pressure well, that she was not as committed to her role as she should be. The stories were subtle but damaging. When Catherine's friends saw these articles, they immediately called her. Catherine finally turned on her phone and saw hundreds of messages. Most were supportive, but she could see what Camilla was trying to do. Instead of feeling angry, Catherine felt sad. She had never wanted to hurt anyone. She just needed to save herself. One of Catherine's closest friends, Emma, drove to the cottage to visit her. Emma had known Catherine since childhood, long before the palace and the titles. She arrived with groceries and a warm hug. "You look so much better," Emma said, studying Catherine's face. "You have color in your cheeks again. Your eyes look brighter." Catherine smiled, a real genuine smile. "I feel better. I feel like I can breathe again." "Is that strange?" "Not strange at all," Emma replied. "You were drowning and you finally came up for air. Anyone would feel better after that." They spent the afternoon cooking together and talking. Emma told Catherine about the articles that had been published, about the whispers and rumors that Camilla was spreading. "She cannot stand that you left," Emma said. "She sees it as a personal rejection. And worse, she sees that you are happy without all of it. That is what really bothers her. You proved that you do not need the palace to be okay. You are better without it." Catherine thought about this. "I never wanted to make her angry. I just needed space to heal." "Why is that so hard to understand?" "Because she has spent her whole life fighting for that position, that status," Emma explained. She cannot imagine someone voluntarily walking away from it. To her, it is the ultimate prize. To you, it became a prison. You both value completely different things. Back at the palace, Camilla held another meeting. This time she wanted to plan a major public event that would show the family was strong and united, even without Catherine. She wanted to prove that they did not need Catherine, that everything was fine. "We will host a grand charity gala," Camilla announced. "We will invite everyone important. We will show that this family is thriving. The focus will be on the work we do, not on who is absent." The staff began planning immediately, but there was a noticeable lack of enthusiasm. Many of them missed Catherine. She had always been kind to staff members, remembering their names, asking about their families, bringing treats for birthdays. Camilla was efficient and organized, but she was not warm. She did not connect with people the same way. As the weeks turned into a month, Catherine started thinking about her future. She could not hide in the cottage forever, though part of her wished she could. She began writing in a journal, pouring out all her thoughts and feelings. She wrote about the loneliness she had felt at the palace, the pressure to be perfect, the constant criticism no matter what she did. She also wrote about the good things, the charitable work she loved, the people she had met who inspired her, the causes she cared about deeply. She realized she did not want to give up that work. She just needed to do it on her own terms without the suffocating rules and expectations. Catherine started making phone calls to some of the charities she had worked with. She explained that she was taking time away, but wanted to stay involved in a quieter, more private way. The organizations were understanding and supportive. They valued her genuine passion for their causes. Meanwhile, Camilla's charity gala was approaching. She had spent a fortune making sure everything was perfect. The flowers, the decorations, the guest list, the menu. Everything had to be flawless. She needed this event to be a success. She needed to prove that she was in control, that everything was fine. The night of the gala arrived. Camilla wore a stunning gown and her best jewelry. She greeted guests with a practiced smile and made small talk with ease. On the surface, everything looked perfect. But people noticed that something was missing. The warmth was gone. The genuine joy was absent. Several guests quietly asked about Catherine. "How is she doing? Is she well? We miss seeing her." Each question made Camilla's smile tighter. Her responses more clipped. "She is taking a well-deserved break," Camilla would say, her tone suggesting the topic was closed. But the questions kept coming. People genuinely cared about Catherine. They had seen her kindness and authenticity. They wanted to know she was okay. At the cottage, Catherine was having a simple dinner with Emma and 2 other close friends. They laughed and told stories, enjoying the easy companionship. No one was dressed up. No one was performing. It was just 4 friends being themselves. "Have you thought about what you want to do next?" one friend asked. Catherine nodded slowly. "I have been thinking a lot. I want to continue the charity work, but differently. I want to be more hands-on, less about photo opportunities and more about actual impact. I want to work with smaller organizations that really need help. I want to do things that matter, not just things that look good." Her friends supported this idea completely. They offered to help her however they could. That night, as Camilla's gala was winding down, she stood alone for a moment in a quiet corner. Despite all the planning, all the perfection, all the effort, she felt hollow. The event had been a success by all measures, but she felt no satisfaction. She could not stop thinking about Catherine, about how she had walked away so easily. What Camilla did not understand was that it had not been easy at all. Catherine had struggled with the decision for months. She had cried, lost sleep, and felt guilty. But she had finally chosen herself, and that had made all the difference. As both women lay in their beds that night, they were thinking about each other. Camilla's thoughts were full of anger and resentment. Catherine's thoughts were full of sadness and hope. The goodbye that Catherine had said weeks ago was creating ripples that continued to spread, changing everything in ways no one had expected. 2 months had passed and the situation had not improved. If anything, the tension between Catherine and Camilla had grown stronger, even though they had not spoken a single word to each other. Catherine remained at the cottage, building a new life for herself. Camilla remained at the palace, growing more bitter with each passing day. Catherine had started volunteering at a local community center. She helped serve meals, taught reading classes to adults, and organized donation drives. No cameras followed her. No reporters wrote about her work. She was just Catherine, a woman helping her community. And she loved it. The people at the community center had no idea who she really was at first. They just knew her as a kind woman who showed up on time, worked hard, and genuinely cared. When some of them eventually recognized her, they were shocked. "You are really her?" asked Maria, an elderly woman who Catherine had been helping with her reading lessons. "The one from the palace?" Catherine smiled gently. "I am just me. That other life feels like it happened to someone else." Maria nodded wisely. "Sometimes we need to lose ourselves to find ourselves. You look happy, dear. That is what matters." These simple interactions filled Catherine with more joy than any palace event ever had. She was making real connections with real people. She was helping in meaningful ways. She was living authentically. But while Catherine was finding peace, Camilla was losing hers. The media had started to shift its narrative even more. Catherine was being praised for her humanitarian work and her courage to step away from toxic situations. Meanwhile, questions were being raised about the palace environment. Why had Catherine felt the need to leave? What had made her so unhappy? Camilla saw these articles and felt her anger reach new heights. She called another meeting with her advisors and closest allies. Her face was tight with frustration as she addressed the room. "We need to do something more aggressive," Camilla said, her voice cold. "These stories need to stop. Catherine is being treated like a hero when she is nothing but a quitter. We need to remind people of her failures, her mistakes. We need to show that she was not as perfect as everyone remembers." One of her advisors, an older gentleman named Richard, shook his head. "With all due respect, that strategy could backfire badly. The public clearly sympathizes with Catherine. Attacking her directly will only make things worse. It will make you look vindictive." Camilla's eyes flashed with anger. "So what do you suggest? That I just sit here and let her destroy everything I have worked for? Let her make me look like the villain?" "She is not trying to destroy anything," Richard said carefully. "She is simply living her life quietly. Perhaps the best strategy is to do the same. Focus on your own work, your own causes. Let time heal these wounds." But Camilla could not let it go. She authorized several more negative stories to be planted in the media. These stories questioned Catherine's mental state, suggested she was having a breakdown, implied she was being manipulated by bad advisors. The stories were cruel and calculated to damage Catherine's reputation. When these articles came out, Catherine's friends rallied around her. Emma was furious when she read the latest piece. She drove to the cottage immediately, waving the newspaper in her hand. "This is outrageous," Emma said. "These lies need to stop. We should sue. We should fight back." Catherine took the newspaper and read through the article. She felt sad but not surprised. "This is what happens when someone feels threatened. Camilla sees my happiness as an attack on her. She cannot understand that this is not about her at all. This is about me choosing myself." "But we cannot let her spread these lies," Emma insisted. Catherine thought for a moment. Fighting back would mean engaging in her game. It would mean going back into that world of attacks and counterattacks, statements and denials. "I left to get away from all of that. I will not go back, not even to defend myself." "So you will just let her say whatever she wants?" "The people who matter know the truth," Catherine said calmly. "The people I help every day, the friends who stood by me, the charities I work with. They know who I am. I do not need to prove anything to people who have already made up their minds." This response frustrated Emma, but she understood. Catherine had found peace and she was not willing to sacrifice it, not even to protect her reputation. Back at the palace, Camilla was meeting with several family members. Some of them were concerned about the direction things were heading. They felt the attacks on Catherine had gone too far. "This needs to stop," said one family member, a respected elder. "The family is being torn apart by this feud." Catherine left peacefully. She did not attack anyone. She did not make demands. She simply walked away. "Why can you not let her go?" Camilla stood up abruptly. "Because her leaving makes me look weak. It suggests that something was wrong here, that I made her life so unbearable she had to escape." Do you not see how that damages me? How that damages all of us? Perhaps something was wrong, the elder said quietly. Perhaps we should look at why she felt she had to leave instead of attacking her for leaving. This comment made Camilla even angrier. She left the meeting early, slamming doors as she went. In her private rooms, she paced back and forth, her mind racing. She felt betrayed by everyone. Even her own family was turning against her, sympathizing with Catherine. That evening, Camilla made a decision. If subtle attacks were not working, she would try something different. She would reach out to Catherine directly. Not to apologize, but to demand a meeting. She would make Catherine see reason, make her understand the damage she was causing. Camilla sent a formal letter to the cottage. The letter was not kind. It demanded Catherine return immediately to discuss the situation. It accused her of being selfish and irresponsible. It threatened consequences if she did not comply. When Catherine received the letter, she read it twice. Then she did something Camilla never expected. She wrote a simple, calm response. I left to protect my health and well-being. I have no intention of returning to an environment that made me sick. I wish you peace and happiness in your life. I ask that you grant me the same courtesy. Please do not contact me again, unless it is with kindness and respect. She sent the letter and felt relieved. She had set a boundary clearly and calmly. Now it was up to Camilla to respect it or not. When Camilla received Catherine's response, she was shocked. The calm, firm tone, the clear boundary, the refusal to engage in drama. It made her even more angry because she realized she had no power over Catherine anymore. Catherine had truly let go, and there was nothing Camilla could do about it. That night, Camilla sat alone in her grand rooms, surrounded by luxury and status, feeling more isolated than ever. Meanwhile, Catherine was at the community center, laughing with the children in her reading class, feeling more connected than she had in years. The contrast between their two lives was stark. One was living in a palace but feeling trapped. The other was living simply but feeling free. One was consumed by jealousy and anger. The other was filled with peace and purpose. The goodbye that Catherine had said months ago was not just a goodbye to a place or a role. It was a goodbye to a version of herself that had tried to please everyone else. It was a hello to a new version, one that valued her own well-being and happiness. And that change was permanent. 3 months into Catherine's departure, something unexpected happened. A major documentary team approached Catherine with an offer. They wanted to film a series about her work at the community center and her new life. They promised it would be respectful, honest, and focused on the positive impact she was making. Catherine was hesitant at first. She had left to escape the cameras and the constant scrutiny. But the director explained that this would be different. It would show real work, real impact, real life. No staged events, no fake smiles, just truth. After discussing it with her closest friends, Catherine agreed, but only on her terms. She would have full approval over the final cut. If anything felt exploitative or untrue, it would not air. The production team agreed to all her conditions. When Camilla heard about the documentary, she felt a surge of panic mixed with rage. Catherine was going to tell her story to the world. What would she say? Would she talk about why she left? Would she blame Camilla? Would she expose what life at the palace was really like? Camilla immediately contacted her lawyers. Can we stop this documentary? Is there any legal way to prevent it from airing? The lawyers reviewed the situation and delivered bad news. Catherine has every right to tell her own story. Unless she breaks confidentiality agreements or makes demonstrably false statements, there is nothing we can do. Camilla felt trapped. For the first time, she realized she had no control over this situation. Catherine was free to do whatever she wanted, and there was nothing Camilla could do to stop her. The documentary filming began. Cameras followed Catherine as she served breakfast at the community center. They filmed her teaching reading lessons to adults who had never learned. They captured her genuine laughter as she played with children after school. They showed her shopping for groceries, cooking simple meals, and taking long walks on the beach. One scene showed Catherine sitting by the fireplace, speaking directly to the camera. The interviewer asked, "Why did you leave?" Catherine took a deep breath before answering. "I left because I was losing myself. Every day I felt more like a puppet and less like a person. I was constantly told how to dress, how to speak, what to think, who to be. And slowly I forgot who I actually was underneath all those expectations. I left to remember. Do you regret your decision? The interviewer asked. Not for a single moment, Catherine said, her voice strong and clear. I regret that it took me so long to make it. I regret the years I spent being unhappy, trying to fit into a mold that was never meant for me. But leaving? That was the best decision I ever made. The interviewer then asked carefully, There have been negative stories about you in the media. Stories questioning your mental health, your stability. How do you respond to those? Catherine smiled sadly. Those stories are not about me. They are about someone who is very angry that I chose myself over their expectations. I feel sorry for anyone who cannot understand why a person would choose happiness over status. I hope they find peace someday. She never mentioned Camilla by name, but everyone would know who she meant. Back at the palace, Camilla watched clips from the documentary that had been leaked to the media. She watched Catherine looking healthy, happy, and at peace. She heard Catherine's words about choosing herself, about not regretting the decision, about feeling sorry for those who could not understand. She feels sorry for me? Camilla said to herself, her voice shaking with anger. She walks away from everything, abandons her responsibilities, makes me look terrible, and now she feels sorry for me? Camilla's jealousy had transformed into something darker. It was no longer just about Catherine leaving. It was about Catherine thriving after leaving. It was about Catherine being happy, being praised, being loved by the public, all while Camilla felt increasingly isolated and criticized. Camilla decided to give a television interview of her own. Against the advice of her counselors, she agreed to sit down with a major news program. She wanted to tell her side of the story. She wanted people to understand her perspective. The interview did not go as Camilla planned. The journalist asked pointed questions about why Catherine had felt the need to leave. Camilla's answers came across as defensive and cold. She talked about duty and responsibility, about commitment and loyalty. But she never talked about understanding or compassion. When asked, "Do you miss Catherine?" Camilla's pause was too long. Finally, she said, "I miss having someone who fulfilled their obligations properly." That answer went viral. People were shocked by how cold and unfeeling it sounded. Social media erupted with criticism of Camilla. People compared her interview to Catherine's documentary clips. One showed warmth, growth, and healing. The other showed bitterness, resentment, and rigidity. The contrast could not have been more clear. Public opinion shifted even more strongly in Catherine's favor. Polls showed that over 70% of people supported Catherine's decision to leave. Many said they would have done the same thing. Camilla's reputation took a serious hit. She was seen as the person who had made Catherine's life so difficult that she had to escape. Whether fair or not, that narrative was now firmly established in the public mind. The documentary aired 3 weeks later. It was watched by millions of people. The response was overwhelmingly positive. People were moved by Catherine's honesty, inspired by her courage, and touched by her genuine kindness. Donations to the community center where she volunteered increased by 400% overnight. Catherine received thousands of messages from people who felt inspired by her story. People who were in their own difficult situations, feeling trapped by expectations or obligations. Her story gave them permission to choose themselves, to walk away from what was not serving them, to prioritize their own well-being. One letter particularly touched Catherine. It was from a young woman who wrote, "I have been in an unhappy marriage for 5 years, staying because I thought I had to. Watching your documentary made me realize that leaving is not giving up. It is choosing life. Thank you for showing me that." Catherine cried when she read that letter. She realized that her decision to leave, as difficult as it had been, was helping others find their own courage. Meanwhile, Camilla was dealing with the aftermath of her interview. Several charities quietly distanced themselves from her. Event invitations decreased. The warmth from staff members cooled even further. She had become isolated by her own bitterness. One evening, a family member came to visit Camilla. It was the same elder who had tried to reason with her months ago. He sat down across from her and spoke gently but firmly. "You are destroying yourself with this jealousy," he said. "Catherine has moved on. She is living her life, but you are stuck. consumed by anger and resentment. This is not hurting her. It is only hurting you. Camilla's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. She made me look like a fool. She made me look cruel. No, the elder said. She simply told her truth. How people interpret that is not her fault or her problem. You have a choice now. You can continue down this path of bitterness, or you can let go and focus on your own life, your own work, your own happiness. Camilla wanted to argue, but she was tired. So tired, the constant anger was exhausting. The jealousy was eating her alive. She knew the elder was right, but she did not know how to let go. That night, both women looked up at the same sky from different places. Catherine saw stars and felt gratitude. Camilla saw darkness and felt emptiness. The goodbye that had started this journey had led them to two completely different destinations, and there was no going back. 6 months had passed since Catherine walked away. Spring had turned to summer, and summer was fading into autumn. The cottage by the sea had become Catherine's sanctuary. She had repainted the walls in soft, warm colors. She had planted a small garden with vegetables and flowers. She had created a life that belonged entirely to her. Catherine's work at the community center had expanded. She now ran 3 programs: adult literacy, youth mentorship, and a community garden project. Every morning she woke up excited about the day ahead. She had purpose without pressure, meaning without manipulation. One afternoon, Catherine received an unexpected phone call. It was from a respected elder stateswoman, someone who had worked in public service for decades. The woman asked if she could visit Catherine at the cottage for a private conversation. Curious and a bit nervous, Catherine agreed. 2 days later, the woman arrived. Her name was Margaret, and she had a reputation for wisdom and straight talk. They sat in Catherine's small living room drinking tea and watching the waves through the window. "I have been watching your journey," Margaret began, "and I have been watching what has been happening at the palace. I thought it was time someone told you the truth about what you have started." Catherine set down her teacup. "What do you mean?" Margaret smiled. "You probably do not realize it, but your decision to leave has changed everything. You have shown that it is possible to walk away from a toxic situation, even when the whole world is watching. You have given permission to countless people to prioritize their well-being over other people's expectations. That is revolutionary." "I did not mean to start anything," Catherine said softly. "I just needed to save myself." "The most powerful changes often begin that way," Margaret replied. "But here is what you might not know. Your leaving has forced the palace to look at itself. They are asking questions they never asked before. Why do people leave? What makes someone so unhappy they have to escape? How can we do better?" Catherine was surprised. "Really? I thought they just wanted to punish me for leaving." "Camilla did, yes," Margaret acknowledged. "But not everyone shares her view. Many people, including several family members, have been pushing for changes. They want to create an environment where people like you do not feel the need to run away. Your departure was a wake-up call." This was news Catherine had not expected. She had assumed everyone at the palace hated her, blamed her, wanted her to fail. The thought that her leaving might actually lead to positive changes had never occurred to her. "What about Camilla?" Catherine asked carefully. Margaret sighed. "Camilla is struggling. Her jealousy has consumed her, and it is damaging her reputation and her relationships. Some people are trying to help her see that her anger is self-destructive, but she is not ready to listen yet. Perhaps she never will be. That is her journey to take or not take." They talked for hours. Margaret shared stories from her own life, times when she had to make difficult choices, when she had to stand alone against criticism. She told Catherine that courage is not the absence of fear, but taking action despite the fear. As Margaret was leaving, she turned to Catherine. "You might consider writing a book about your experience. Not a revenge story or an attack, but an honest account of what you learned about boundaries, self-worth, and choosing yourself. I think it could help a lot of people." Catherine had never thought about writing a book, but the idea planted itself in her mind. Meanwhile, at the palace, Camilla was facing a crisis. Several major organizations had declined to work with her on their upcoming campaigns. The stated reasons were polite, but the message was clear. Her reputation had been damaged too badly. She was no longer seen as a positive ambassador. For the first time, Camilla was forced to face the consequences of her actions. The jealousy and anger she had directed at Catherine had backfired completely. People did not see her as strong or justified. They saw her as bitter and vindictive. One quiet evening, Camilla found herself alone in her sitting room, the same room where she had first read Catherine's goodbye message 6 months ago. She looked around at all the luxury surrounding her. The expensive furniture, the priceless art, the beautiful objects. She had everything except what mattered most: peace, connection, genuine affection. For the first time, Camilla allowed herself to really think about Catherine's words from the documentary. I left to remember who I was. Did Camilla even know who she was anymore? When had she last done something simply because it brought her joy? When had she last had a real conversation with someone? Not a strategic discussion, but a genuine human connection. The realization hit her hard. She had spent so much energy fighting Catherine, resenting Catherine, trying to damage Catherine. And for what? Catherine was thriving. She was happy, healthy, and making a real difference in people's lives. While Camilla was sitting alone in a palace, surrounded by beautiful things but feeling empty inside, Camilla did something she rarely did. She cried. Real tears, not the controlled tears she sometimes produced for public sympathy. She cried for the person she had become, for the opportunities she had wasted being angry, for the life she was living that felt increasingly hollow. The next morning, Camilla requested a private meeting with her closest advisor, the one who had consistently told her the truth even when she did not want to hear it. His name was Richard, and he had served the family for 30 years. I need to change, Camilla said simply. I do not know how, but I cannot continue like this. The anger is destroying me. Richard nodded, his expression compassionate. Acknowledging that is the first step, but you should know real change is difficult. It will require you to let go of your resentment toward Catherine. It will require you to look honestly at your own behavior and choices. Are you truly ready for that? Camilla was not sure, but she knew she had to try. What do I do first? Stop the attacks, Richard said firmly. No more negative stories planted in the media. No more attempts to damage Catherine's reputation. Let her live her life in peace. That is the foundation, Camilla agreed. It was harder than she expected to let go of that control, that desire to strike back, but she committed to trying. Over the next few weeks, something subtle began to shift. The negative stories about Catherine stopped appearing. The whisper campaign ceased. Camilla started focusing her energy on her own work rather than on destroying Catherine. It was not easy. Old habits are hard to break. Sometimes Camilla would see a photo of Catherine looking happy, and the jealousy would flare up again. But she was trying to sit with those feelings instead of acting on them. Catherine noticed the change too. The attacks had stopped. The media had moved on to other stories. She felt like she could finally breathe even more freely, without constantly looking over her shoulder waiting for the next blow. One afternoon, Catherine started writing. Not a book yet, just her thoughts and feelings. She wrote about the journey from feeling trapped to feeling free. She wrote about learning to set boundaries. She wrote about discovering that walking away is sometimes the bravest thing you can do. As she wrote, Catherine realized something important. She did not hate Camilla. She actually felt compassion for her. She understood that Camilla's jealousy came from her own insecurities and fears. That did not excuse Camilla's behavior, but it helped Catherine let go of any lingering anger. Both women were at turning points in their journeys. Catherine was moving forward into a future she was creating for herself. Camilla was just beginning to look inward, to question the path she had been on. Whether Camilla would truly change remained to be seen, but at least she had stopped actively causing harm. The goodbye that had changed everything was still reverberating through both their lives. But now, instead of creating more chaos, it was opening doors to growth, understanding, and possibly even healing. The story was far from over, but it was evolving into something neither woman had expected. 1 year had passed since Catherine said goodbye and walked away. The anniversary arrived quietly, without fanfare or drama. Catherine marked it by sitting on the beach at sunrise, reflecting on everything that had happened and everything she had learned. She had changed in ways she never expected. She was stronger but softer, more confident but more humble, more independent but more connected to what really mattered. The scared woman who had driven away from the palace a year ago felt like a different person entirely. Catherine's book was nearly finished. She had spent months writing it, revising it, making sure every word was honest and true. The book was not an attack on anyone. It was simply her story, told in her own voice. It talked about losing yourself in other people's expectations and finding your way back to your authentic self. The community center had grown beyond anything Catherine had imagined. With the increased donations and attention, they had been able to expand their programs. They now served 3 times as many families. Catherine had hired staff and trained volunteers, but she still taught her reading class every Tuesday and Thursday evening. Those classes were the highlight of her week. One of her students, a 40-year-old man named James, had just read his first complete book. Catherine watched with tears in her eyes as he stood in front of the class and read the final chapter aloud. After years of hiding his inability to read, he had found the courage to learn. His success was more meaningful to Catherine than any palace event had ever been. After the class, as Catherine was cleaning up, her phone rang. It was an unknown number. She almost did not answer, but something made her pick up. "Hello? Catherine, this is Richard. From the palace. Do you have a moment to talk?" Catherine's heart started beating faster. She had not heard from anyone at the palace in months. "Yes, I can talk." "Is everything okay?" "Everything is fine," Richard assured her. "I am calling because I think it is time you knew about some changes that have been happening. Changes that were inspired, at least in part, by you." For the next 20 minutes, Richard told Catherine about reforms that had been implemented at the palace. New support systems for people struggling with the pressure, counseling services made available, more flexibility in how people could fulfill their duties, changes to the media strategy to be less controlling and more authentic. "These changes are not perfect," Richard admitted, "and there is still a long way to go. But it is a start. Your leaving forced people to ask questions they should have asked years ago. You helped create change just by choosing yourself." Catherine did not know what to say. She had never intended to change anything. She had just needed to survive. "There is something else," Richard continued, his voice careful. "Camilla wanted me to tell you that she is sorry. She is not ready to say it directly, and she might never be. But she wanted you to know that she understands now that she was wrong. The jealousy, the attacks, all of it. She sees it now for what it was." Catherine was quiet for a long moment. "Tell her I forgive her. Tell her I hope she finds peace." After the call ended, Catherine sat down, processing everything she had heard. The palace was changing. Camilla was changing. The goodbye she had said a year ago had rippled out in ways she never could have predicted. At the palace, Camilla was working in her office when Richard returned from making the phone call. He told her about the conversation, about Catherine's forgiveness. Camilla closed her eyes. She did not deserve forgiveness, she thought. But maybe that was the point. Forgiveness was not about deserving. It was about letting go, for both the person who forgives and the person who is forgiven. Camilla had been in therapy for 6 months. It was something she had resisted for years, seeing it as a sign of weakness, but she had finally accepted that she needed help. The jealousy that had consumed her came from deep insecurities she had never addressed. She was working on them now, slowly and painfully. She still had moments of resentment when she thought about Catherine. Old habits die hard. But those moments were becoming less frequent and less intense. She was learning to focus on her own life, her own work, her own journey. Camilla had even started volunteering at a local hospital, visiting with elderly patients who had no family. It was something she did privately, without cameras or publicity. At first, she did it because her therapist suggested it would help her connect with people in a genuine way, but she had found she actually enjoyed it. The patients did not care about her title or status. They just appreciated having someone to talk to. One elderly woman named Dorothy had become particularly special to Camilla. Dorothy was 92 years old, sharp as a tack, and did not hold back her opinions. One afternoon, Dorothy looked at Camilla and said, "You seem different today." "Lighter somehow," Camilla smiled. "I am letting go of something I have been carrying for too long." "Good," Dorothy said firmly. "Anger is too heavy to carry around. Trust me, I know. I wasted 10 years being angry at my sister over something stupid. When she died, I would have given anything to have those years back. Do not waste your time being angry, dear. Life is too short." That conversation stayed with Camilla. Life was too short. She had wasted a year being consumed by jealousy of Catherine when she could have been working on herself, improving her own life, finding her own peace. Catherine's book was published 2 months later. It became an immediate bestseller. People connected with her honesty and vulnerability. The book tour took Catherine to cities across the country, where she met thousands of people who had been inspired by her story. At every event, people told her their own stories of walking away from toxic situations, of choosing themselves, of finding the courage to change their lives. Catherine realized that her personal journey had become something larger. It had become a movement of sorts, encouraging people to value their own well-being. The media tried to create drama by asking Catherine about Camilla in every interview. But Catherine refused to engage. "That chapter is closed," she would say calmly. "I wish her well, and I have moved on." One evening, 6 months after the book was published, Catherine was back at the cottage. She was cooking dinner and listening to music when her doorbell rang. She was not expecting anyone. When she opened the door, she was shocked to see a delivery person holding an enormous bouquet of white roses. There was a card. Catherine opened it with shaking hands. It simply said, "Thank you for your grace. I am sorry for my lack of it. I hope you continue to thrive." With respect, C. Catherine knew immediately who C was. She put the flowers in a vase and placed them on her kitchen table. She did not need the apology to move forward. She had already forgiven and let go, but receiving it still felt like something coming full circle. That night, Catherine sat down and wrote the final words for a new project she had been considering. It was a guide for people who were thinking about leaving toxic situations. She called it "The Courage to Choose Yourself." It would be free, available online to anyone who needed it. At the palace, Camilla saw a notification on her phone. Catherine had posted something new on her website. Against her better judgment, Camilla clicked on it. She read the introduction to Catherine's new guide. There was no mention of the palace, no mention of Camilla. It was simply a kind, supportive, practical guide for people who were struggling. Camilla realized something in that moment. Catherine had never been her enemy. Catherine had simply been a woman trying to survive and eventually thrive. The enemy had been Camilla's own jealousy, insecurity, and fear. Catherine had just been a mirror, reflecting back all the things Camilla was afraid to face about herself. 2 years after the goodbye that changed everything, both women were in completely different places. Catherine had built a life centered on authenticity, service, and genuine connection. She had written books, helped thousands of people, and found true happiness. She still lived in the cottage by the sea, still taught reading classes on Tuesday and Thursday evenings, still found joy in simple things. Camilla had learned to be less bitter, less controlling, less consumed by what other people were doing. She still had work to do, but she was trying. She had started to find meaning in quieter ways, in private acts of kindness rather than public displays. She would never be as genuinely warm as Catherine, but she was learning to be more human. They never became friends. They never had another conversation, but they had both learned the lessons they needed to learn. Catherine had learned that choosing yourself is not selfish, it is necessary. Camilla had learned that trying to control and diminish others only diminishes yourself. The goodbye that Catherine said 2 years ago had indeed changed everything. It changed how the palace operated. It changed how thousands of people thought about their own lives and choices. It changed Catherine from a woman losing herself to a woman fully alive. And it changed Camilla from someone consumed by jealousy to someone beginning to find her own peace. On the 2nd anniversary of her departure, Catherine returned to the beach at sunrise. She thought about that scared woman who had driven away 2 years ago, not knowing what would happen next. She wished she could tell that woman that everything would be okay, better than okay. Everything would be beautiful. As the sun rose over the ocean, painting the sky in brilliant colors, Catherine smiled. She had said goodbye to a life that was killing her spirit.